And the next piece is read by Richard Hurndall.
He said that for general improvement, a man should read whatever his immediate inclination prompts him to. Though to be sure, if a man has a science to learn, he must regularly and resolutely advance. He added, what we read with inclination makes a much stronger impression. If we read without inclination, half the mind is employed in fixing the attention. So there is but one half to be employed on what we read. He told us he read Fielding's Amelia through without stopping. He said, if a man begins to read in the middle of a book and feels an inclination to go on, let him not quit it to go to the beginning. He may perhaps not again feel the inclination.
Anthony Burgess.
Well, that is Boswell's life of Dr. Samuel Johnson, Lit D, I think.
Do you take exception to the doctor's advice there?
No, I think the doctor said the final bit of advice the doctor gives is very right. I doubt if I myself have read a book through in my life.
No, he didn't say it there.
Well, he said if a man begins a book in the middle and has an inclination to go on, he should go on.
Yes.
And that leads on to the fact, of course, that Johnson read very few books through. He knew more books than anybody, so Boswell says. But he'd read very few books through.
He admitted that.
He admitted that. He used a book. He tore a book to pieces. He made it part of himself. He didn't allow himself to be enclosed by the book.
Didn't Boswell say somewhere that he had a wonderful power of tearing the heart out of a book? But it is not. I don't think it ought to be an example to all of us.
Bernadine Bishop, don't you just love that Dr. Johnson?
Well, as I listened to the passage, not being able to place it, I'm afraid, I did get the impression of a rather good educator being talked about by some keen disciple. But I don't know that this idea of just following one's inclinations. I mean, he must perhaps have had very strong inclinations about reading anyway.
He was in a position to indulge them.
I don't think all of us would
Anthony
ever
Blond.
read at all if one followed.
Don't you think the passage was in fact rather ugly and difficult to listen to? It is very much the mark of a shorthand diarist tape recording sort of mind.
Well,
He said,
I
the
do-
repetition of he said and the inclination.
I do hope you're right, because sometimes I think Boswell invented it all.
Do you?
I mean, it's that good.
No, he must have been the most tremendously attractive and good man, Johnson. I mean, we know he suffered a lot of pain. He never really was very bad-tempered, and always in such a thunderingly complicated way that you were touched to be the object of his attention. I don't think he ever hurt anybody. But I think it's an awfully boring bit, and I don't think it's a very exciting book. I prefer the anecdotes that other people tell of Johnson.
Oh, yes, well, they're not going to give you one of those on this
No,
program.
no,
They
of
want
course
to test your
Incidentally,
expertise.
I think he was a fine old leg puller, Dr. Johnson, and I wonder how much he was kidding. He didn't like Fielding, of course, and I wonder if he'd have said the same for a novel or a novelist that he really liked. I bet he read lots of novels through from cover to cover and didn't miss a word.
Well, he must have been one of the very few men who read the whole of the Anatomy of Melancholy. He says that he used to get up early in the morning. I forget how early, 4 o'clock, 4 a.m., to start reading the Anatomy of Melancholy.
Of course, he couldn't sleep well. He was, as you remember, not a man who could sleep.
Couldn't get up
And indeed
easily,
suffered
though,
from
either.
No, true.
Something I always wonder is how definitive were all these opinions which were so faithfully recorded by Boswell. I mean, didn't Johnson perhaps, like everybody, say one thing one day and another thing another day?
I'm sure he was pestered beyond belief, to answer academic questions by this chap who was
Yes,
always there.
surely, that's what I
They're a
always
kind
feel.
of comedy team, in a way.
Yeah. He was a very limited man in a way. Remember, he couldn't understand Bishop Berkeley's theory, and yet he had to make a sort of smart point of it. So he kicked the stone by the door and said, "Sir, we refute it
Well, it's
thus."
much more than
Yes.
a smart point, I think.
I
That
think
is
so.
the ordinary human reaction to it. I think he had
Pragmatist.
A very
wonderfully
colourful
human
thing
reaction.
to do.
I think having
You don't
Boswell
have-
around would push anyone into a
Yes,
position of
quite.
having to have an opinion
Yes.
about everything. Anyway.
No, but he did in general, I think, and he was a wonderfully funny man who didn't take himself in deadly earnest. He described his style of talking, remember, as talking for victory. Whether it was Boswell or anyone else, he had to rather, not exactly crush people, but get the better of them, and he knew that he wasn't to be taken in deadly earnest.
And I must say, I think Boswell must have been an appealing man in his way, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. I remember the first time that Johnson, perhaps feeling a little pressed to do so, but the feeling comes out much better than that. They're sitting together, and finally Johnson says, "Give me your hand. I have taken a liking to you." And I think that's one of the most moving lines I've ever read in my life.
Oh, yes.